Hi, this is Wing. Napic has just released their first half of 2020 property market data. So because of that, I will be releasing a series of videos whereby I will be looking into some of the important or interesting informations which is directly and indirectly that will impact the real estate market. Data that I will be looking into are property transaction numbers, property value report, how the primary market and the unsold numbers are, and finally I'll be also looking into the bank loan status, whereby this information is released by Bank Negara Malaysia on a monthly basis. So in today's video, I'll be looking into the first one, which is the property transaction report. This is a property transaction first half 2020 numbers. So property transaction is basically, it indicates for the first 6 months of 2020, which is January to June 2020, how many real estate transactions that happened in the whole Malaysia. So you can see from the numbers, first half 2020, there is a total of 115,476,000 real estate or property transaction in the first half of 2020. So if you compare first half 2019 and first half 2020, so you can see that there is a drop, and this drop is 27.9%. So which means that if you compare first half 2019 and the first half of 2020 in terms of number of transactions, there is actually a 27.9% drop. Beside it, this is the value of the property transaction. So for the first half of 2020, which is January 2020 to June 2020, there's a total of 46.94 billion worth of property transactions. If you compare with first half of 2019, we also see a drop in terms of value of property, and the drop is 31.5%. So you can see from the two graphs, from 2016 to 2019, we were almost very flat. But from 2019 to 2020, there's a drop for the volume, and also for the value of property is also similarly. Okay, it was flat from 2016 to 2019, and there is a significant drop in 2020. So if we move on, we are still looking into the property transaction data for first half 2020, but right now this information is broken down in terms of the individual months. So you can see it's January, February, March, April, May, and June 2020. So first look at the volume. As we mentioned just now from the previous data, there is a total of 115,000 transactions. So if you look at what happens in the individual month, so you can see January and February we were doing okay. Then when it comes to March, whereby the second half of March we basically had a lockdown, so you can see the drop happens in March, and the worst month was in April. And then subsequently in May, we went into a conditional MCO, whereby the business activity has been slowly reopened back. So you can see that there is a recovery in May, and in June we were practically back to where we were before the lockdown. So previously, I believe everybody heard a lot about the V recovery. So what we can see from the volume of transactions, we did hit by COVID-19 for the volume, but the recovery was also very significant. So you can see that we actually underwent a V recovery in terms of volume. And in terms of value of property, Similarly, we are also looking from January to 2020. So you can see we were doing fine in January and February. There's a drop in March, and the worst month was April, whereby we had a total lockdown. And when we started with conditional MCO, so you can see that the market recovered. So you can see in terms of value, we also seen a V recovery in terms of value of transaction. These numbers is basically to show how the different subsectors is doing for the first half of 2020. So we look at the different subsector, which is residential, commercial, industrial, agriculture, and also development land. Focus on the percentage of change between the first half of 2020 and also the first half of 2019 as indicated by the percentage. Right? So if you can see across all the different subsector, whether it's residential, commercial, all the way to development land, so you can see there is a significant drop both for in terms of volume and also the value of transactions. And the drop you can see it ranges from for the volume, so you can see the drop ranges from 24.6% all the way to 37.4% drop in terms of volume of transaction, and also in terms of value of transactions it drops from it dropped by 23% to 55.3%. So I want to highlight here is that the COVID impacts all the different subsector. None of the subsectors has been spared by COVID-19 and also due to the lockdown. The lockdown basically impact all the different subsector. So there's not one subsector which is not impacted, or also there's not one subsector which is impacted the most. So you can see here they were all impacted, and the drop is quite the same across all the different subsector. Now let's look at the percentage in terms of subsector. In terms of volume of transactions, the majority, 65% of the transaction is still under the residential, followed by number 2, 20%, which is the agriculture. And for the value of transactions, also 55% of it is residential unit, and 18% of the value of the transaction is commercial. So this we don't see any major changes from 2019 to 2020, whereby the bulk of the volume and also the value comes from the residential subsector. Let's look into the transactions by price range and also the category of transfer. Okay, we first look at the transaction by price range. So you can see based on the total, there is 115,000 transactions, 75,000 transactions is for property value below 300,000. So you can see 65.3% of the transactions are below 300,000. Between 300 to 500,000, there is 20,000 transactions. 500 to 1 million, there is 13,000. And above 1 million, there is 6,000 transactions. So you can see bulk of the transactions, or 65.3% of the transactions, is actually for property value below 300,000. And on the right hand side, it basically shows the category of transfer. The data here basically indicates for the transactions. So you can see individual to individual, basically it's the subsale market whereby the current owner transfer to the new buyer. The next one is developer to individual, whereby developer unit is transferred to the new buyer. So you can see bulk of it, 83,110 transactions. They are all transactions from individual to individual. So it's in the secondary market whereas another 15,421 it's from the primary market, whereby it's a transfer from the developer to individual buyer. We are still looking into the volume of transaction, but right now it is based on the respective state. So the most number of transaction is still Selangor, whereby there is 21,400 transaction, followed by Johor and Perak with 14,000 transaction each. Now, if you look at another one, which is Kuala Lumpur, there is 5,403 transactions. So you can see Selangor contributed the most with 18.5% of the transaction, followed by Johor, which is 13%, and Perak at 12.4% transaction. Now this is the market share between region. Now they also categorize based on the region. So you can see the northern region, I believe is Perak, Penang, and also Kedah, 27.7% transaction. Central is 23.3% transaction. So I believe this is Selangor and also KL. So if you add up Selangor and KL, 21,000 and 5,000, so it's about 27,000 transactions. Yeah, so 23.3% out of the total transaction. Now we are zooming into the residential transaction data for first half of 2020. So this data basically shows the residential category for first half of 2020. In terms of residential property transactions, 30,000 is in the terrace house, whereas another 11,000 each is in the high rise, which is the condominium, and also the vacant plot. So you can see total there is 75,318 units in the residential market. 30,000 is in the terrace. So 41% of the residential transactions is for terrace house. And you can also see similarly in terms of the number of transactions, in terms of price point, 46,000 of the residential units is transacted below 300,000, which is 61.9% of the total residential transactions. 300 to 500,000, there is 16,000 transactions. 500 to 1 million, there is 9,500, and above 1 million, there is 2,600 transactions. This is to show based on state. Selangor is still number one. So you can see Selangor has the most number of residential transaction, which is 17,000 transaction, followed by Johor 10,000 and also Perak by 9,573. And for KL, there is 4,100 units of residential units which is being transacted. So number one is Selangor. Total there is 22.8%, followed by Johor 13% and also Perak by 12.7%. If you add up the Selangor and also KL, total there is 21,000 residential units that is being transacted in the first half of 2020. Yeah.